2000. We're going to turn right now to President Obama's address last night. He said that the U.S. had closed or transferred hundreds of bases to the Iraqis, but many U.S. bases remain in Iraq, as well as the massive U.S. embassy in Baghdad, the size of 80 football fields. For more on the issue of U.S. bases, we turn to a report by independent journalist Jacquie Soohen of Big Noise Films. This report originally aired on the program Empire on Al Jazeera English.
Brigade crossed the border into Kuwait and publicly celebrated the official end of combat in Iraq. But with 50,000 combat-ready American troops still in country, the occupation seems far from over.
The Obama administration will insist that those are not combat soldiers engaged in a combat mission. But if you've got 20 or 30 or 40,000 foreign troops stationed on your soil, I mean, if it looks like an occupation and it smells like an occupation and it sounds like an occupation, it's an occupation.
The current status of forces agreement with Iraq requires a full U.S. withdrawal and an end to the occupation. And the U.S. military and State Department are busy planning for what they call an enduring presence after the treaty's deadline on December 31st, 2011. But on bases like this one in Balad, Iraq, the military continues to invest hundreds of millions in infrastructure improvements, and it is difficult to imagine them fully abandoning everything they are building here.
Joint Base Balad is approximately 10 square miles, which equates to about 6,500 acres. To put that in relative terms, Andrews Air Force Base, which is right outside D.C., is about 20% smaller than that. And we don't even have golf courses here, so that kind of puts into perspective of how big that is. We have about 28,000 people who call Joint Base Balad home. This is the rec center on the backside of these T-walls.
U.S. Air Force Colonel Sal Najumian takes us on a tour of what is essentially a small American city, complete with 3 large gyms, multiple shopping centers, recreation areas, and a movie theater. In 2003, military planners expected to keep Balad as a long-term airbase. While smaller U.S. outposts are closing down around the country, Balad keeps expanding, and some in the military still believe that the U.S. Air Force will remain here past the 2012 deadline.
Our senior leadership is studying options to draw down our presence here in Iraq. Joint Base Balad is one of the bases that's often talked about as one of the more semi-permanent or strategic overwatch bases.
My guess is that the U.S. government and the Iraqi government will find some way of finessing this promise to close down U.S. bases. You know, we've had Air Force bases in the United Kingdom for the last half-century. They're not called U.S. Air Force bases. They're called Royal Air Force bases, but they're owned lock, stock, and barrel by the United States Air Force. So there are ways to work around what might seem like an airtight commitment.
If an agreement is reached and the Iraqis ask us to stay or invite us to stay in whatever capacity, whether it's a training capacity or a co-located capacity, then that's something that can be that'll be decided.
It remains to be seen whether conventional U.S. forces will stay in some of these massive bases, but there are some troops who definitely plan to be here after the withdrawal deadline. 4,500 members of elite special operations forces will train Iraqis and cooperate on counterterrorism missions.
We have advisors that work with the whole chain of incentive.
Brigadier General Simeon Trombitas shows us a training exercise of Iraq's counterterrorism force that his men train and work with. He says that they spend most of their days side by side with Iraqi officers.
Throughout the world and in this region, special forces are, we're special because we do maintain a relationship with foreign forces. There'll be a working relationship for a while.
The United States is going to continue to train Iraqi special operations forces. What this essentially amounts to is an Iraqization of the U.S. occupation.
We maintain that relationship so we impart our values and maintain those values. And the longer we work together, the more alike we are.
What this means is that the United States can say, we don't have a military occupation in Iraq, while at the same time having U.S. military forces effectively directing forces that are masquerading as indigenous, but in reality amount to basic proxy forces for the United States.
In addition to several thousand Special Operations Forces and an unknown number of Air Force personnel, the U.S. State Department has announced that it will hire an army of as many as 7,000 mercenaries to be deployed on 5 enduring presence posts across Iraq.
Yes, a lot of U.S. military forces are going to be leaving the country, but what we're seeing happen right now, the U.S. State Department is beginning a militarization of its operations in Iraq. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has asked for a doubling of the number of armed private security contractors in the country. The State Department has also put in a request from the Pentagon for military-grade equipment, including Black Hawk helicopters, armored vehicles. What we're seeing in Iraq right now is a downsizing and a rebranding of the U.S. occupation.
That's independent journalist and Democracy Now! Correspondent Jeremy Scahill. That report filed by Jacquie Soohen of Big Noise Films.